We've made it to October, probably my favorite month of the year, and thought I'd do a video on this Asian pear tree that I've had growing in the yard. So this tree has been in ground for over 5 years, and I did do a lot of grafting a few years back, but all that remains of the grafts that I put on, the ones that were most vigorous and gave me the most fruit, are going to be Tennosui and Shinseiki. At the time, I didn't know that those were two varieties that are more resistant to fire blight, but I've since learned that they are resistant to that disease. And I really haven't had any issues with the 20th century either. As far as fire blight, that's probably the one issue that you can have with Asian pears. So as far as where this is situated, this is facing west, but you can see that the mulberries really protected it. So this doesn't get afternoon sun, so it's looking pretty good, even though it did get some scorch on some of the leaves and some of the fruit did burn from our pretty intense summer. Most of the foliage looks pretty good. So this fruit here is the Tennosui. This is thought to be a hybrid of a Tennessee pear and a Hasui. So you can see, unlike a European pear, this is much more rounded. And the coloring on these, really typically any kind of Asian pear is going to be more of the golden yellow to brown when it ripens up. So we are at the very beginning of October, and that's typically when these will ripen here. You can pick them a little earlier, but they're going to develop more sweetness the more these hang. And another nice thing about Asian pears is they do keep for a while. So that fruit I just picked came from a graft here. You can see it's quite a thick graft at this point. This was put on 3 years back. I also have another graft down here that I put on of the Shinseiki. I have some fruit from that variety that looks about ready. A little bit of damage up the top there, but not too bad. Definitely a smaller size fruit. And again, that rounded appearance, more like an apple. The majority of this tree is the 20th century. You can see a bunch of pears in here. Oddly enough, it looks like this started flowering recently, because I'm seeing some young fruit set here in the middle of this mature fruit. But you can see on this variety, it's much smaller than the other two varieties. So the skin on this doesn't have that brown papery look to it. It's more smooth and a lighter color, lighter yellow. Here we've got our lineup: the Tennosui, the Shinseiki, and then the 20th century. So you can clearly see the size difference there, as well as the skin tone difference, with the Tennosui really being that beautiful golden brown and more of that russeted texture. So you can see that Tennosui really has the most white flesh to the inside. The others are fairly similar, where they have a little bit more of that yellowing or golden look to it. So I'm going to start with this Tennosui. That is quite good. So this might even be a little bit overly ripe. It didn't have that crunch that you typically get. Is very, very sweet. Has a lot of flavor to it, actually. So that typical pear flavor comes through. It's quite sweet. Very juicy. Skin's a little bit tough, but not unpleasant. I know some people won't eat the skin, but I don't mind it at all. Just adds a different texture. Onto the Shinseiki. So this one did have a little bit more resistance when I cut into it with a knife. So I'm assuming the texture is going to be a little bit more crunchy, more hard. This one definitely has more crunch to it. It's less juicy for sure than the Tennosui, and has definitely more of the texture of an apple overall and taste. I don't actually get a whole lot of pear flavor with it. I mean, it's more nuanced, so I don't really detect much tartness in it, but I would say that the sweetness level is very mild. It's not really a wow factor on that. So far, I like the Tennosui the best. 20th century. This one's in the middle, sits in the middle on the characteristics. Got a little bit more juice to it. It has a little bit more sweetness, and the flavor, the pear flavor comes through a bit more. So to me, that tastes more like a, pear than apple. Whereas the Shinseiki, really, to me, I would almost be fooled into thinking that was an apple, if I wasn't aware of what I was eating. The skin also on the 20th century, like we saw, it's, smoother, a little bit thinner than the other two varieties. But hands down, Tennosui wins as far as my personal opinion goes on what tastes best. And I also find that variety is the most productive. I was blown away when I grafted that variety on, how vigorous that graft took off and all the production. As many of you probably know, I garden out in the Phoenix, Arizona area. We typically do not get very high chill hours in our winter time, and that seems to suit the Asian pear fine. I always get some degree of fruit. I have to say that this year far surpassed any other year, just because we did get a really high amount of chill hours this past winter. It was a very long winter. It's a pretty fuss-free tree, pest-free. You might have noticed that I had bags around the fruit. I have found that you need to do that. The birds will go after your fruit and other critters, so you do want to protect the fruit. As soon as you get one little peck hole on the fruit, then the ants will come in and kind of finish the fruit off. So I found that to be useful practice. And really one of the main advantages is that you're getting fruit right now. There aren't too many things that are ripening fruit right now, especially if you enjoy apples. This is a really nice alternative because, as I'm sure many of you are aware, really the only good apple varieties that we can grow here are the lower chill, and they tend to ripen up, in early summer. So we don't have those fall apples. I've tried myself to grow fall apples like the Fuji and just haven't had good success. I think we just don't get enough chill hours, or it's too warm here for those apples to produce at good quantities. But the Asian pear is that nice alternative. It gives you that kind of crisp, apple-like texture, along with that sweetness and pear flavor. So it's a really nice fruit to grow here in our area. If you found value in kind of comparing these different Asian pear varieties, especially if you're considering growing one yourself, happy fall and happy gardening.